One last go around, one more pregame show. We're previewing the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl, featuring our beloved West Virginia Mountaineers, who are 6-6, versus the number 25 ranked Memphis Tigers, who are 10-2. I'm Carson Fox for Fox on West Virginia Sports. This is a 9 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff from Toyota Stadium in Frisco, Texas, on ESPN if you're watching on TV. The betting odds for this game favor the Tigers. Memphis is a 4.5-point favorite. The over-under set at this game at 58.5. And the ESPN matchup predictor has West Virginia only getting a 47% odds, so still pretty close to 50-50. As I do in all my pregame shows, I'll give you the bowl history / matchup history. Let's talk about injuries. Let's talk about weather. Let's talk about the transfer portal. Let's talk about what to watch for when Memphis has the ball, what to watch for when West Virginia has the ball. Special teams breakdown, 3 keys to victory, and I'll get you out on a prediction. So, gonna make it quick because this is an interesting one, y'all. I'm so in my head about this game, I don't know what to expect. As for the bowl history, matchup history, this will be West Virginia's 41st bowl game appearance, the 4th in the 6 seasons Neil Brown coached the Mountaineers, with West Virginia going 2-1 in those previous bowl games. West Virginia overall has a negative bowl game record, 17 wins, 23 losses all time, and with 3-2 record in bowl games taking place in the state of Texas. There is no history to speak to for this matchup between these two teams. They've never played before. But speaking about the Memphis football program, Memphis has a lot of momentum as a program under head coach Ryan Silverfield, a program that has won 10 games 5 times in the last 10 years. They're expanding their stadium to 50,000 seats with a multi-million-dollar investment into Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, and of course, FedEx's $25 million NIL initiative into Memphis athletics. So I'm sure, they're angling to get set up into the Power Four, probably the most attractive G5 program alongside Boise State. And the way to do that, beyond what they've already done in a season like this and recently, is continue to beat Power 4 competition, and they did so last year, beating Iowa State in the Liberty Bowl. Memphis has actually won 3 straight bowl games, all by double digits. Meanwhile, for West Virginia is just really trying to vie for one more victory for its group of senior starters. That's kind of where I was kind of split on, are there senior starters who want to go out there, put more good tape on field, or there's some guys who really just want to mail it in for the season. If they're underclassmen, do they want to stick around and already starting to look ahead to 2025? And if they were paying attention and not slouching in their chair last Thursday night, or whenever it was, Wednesday night, before the announcement of new head coach Rich Rodriguez, they're going to have to go out there and show some stuff on film. If you're especially an underclassman, I think, as I said in my video on Friday, that anybody caught loafing in any previous game, but including this game now is in the bowl game, now that he is officially the new head coach, that, oh boy, it's just going to be, hell to pay. I would feel like not only in off-season conditioning, but as the roster management operation is set into full blast, hyperspeed over the course of this next month. That's why I was on Twitter today really saying I think this next month for West Virginia is going to be absolutely fascinating in terms of roster management of, is head coach Rich Rodriguez going to take unilateral power over the roster to determine who he wants to stay and who he wants to annex to the transfer portal over these next how many days? Is he going to do those evaluations? Is he going to then work with general manager Drew Fabianich? How are those negotiations going to go with any of the current players while also trying to court players in the transfer portal? This is nuts. So that's kind of where my head is at is Does West Virginia collectively, as a whole, want to play? And then, are there enough of them who want to play and give it their all? I think there is. I do think so. I don't think we're going to necessarily see that kind of, mail it in. I don't even know. I haven't watched back that Texas Tech game since, whether that was essentially a sabotage of the football program. I don't necessarily think so, but it's just very interesting to see. I mean, when we think back to some of the games where there was a lame duck coaching staff coaching a bowl game, you got like your Oklahoma 2008 Fiesta Bowl game where West Virginia rallied, wanted to beat the Sooners, and put on one of the best performances in program history. Then I wasn't really, I mean, this was kind of when I was really young. Like the Music City Bowl was talked about on the Three Guys Before the Game podcast with Tony Caridi, Hoppy Kercheval, and Brad Howe, and talking about the differences from that turnover 25 years ago from Coach Don Nehlen retiring into the first edition of the Rich Rodriguez era. But I can also just think of some bowl games where there just wasn't that much enthusiasm for it. I can think back to like 2017. What was that? The Lockheed Martin Bowl with Chris Chugunov at quarterback and 30-degree temperatures against Texas A&M in the state of Texas. Or even the next year with Will Grier opting out of the bowl. Dana Holgerson was just about on his way out the door wanting to go to Houston. I don't know if he was out the door at that point in time to Houston. So just against Syracuse. So it's just bowl games are such an interesting dynamic. Let me just say, I think it's a little more, there was so much riding into the Duke's Mayo Bowl, I feel like this time a year ago, than there is the juice behind this season. But hey, there's a lot of the same players. There's a lot of the same players on West Virginia's side. This senior class, Wyatt Milam's going to play in this game. Garrett Green's going to play in this game. Cole Taylor's going to play in this game. Sean Martin, TJ Jackson, so many others. So that's where I would say it is, I feel like, worth at least an hour of your evening tomorrow night. If it's just you get that feeling. I'm one almost sometimes who I like to go to bed if West Virginia's winning so that I'm at least satisfied that I'm seeing them winning. If they win, great. That's awesome. If they lose, at least I didn't have to go to bed disappointed. So if you're going into this game tomorrow night, a 9 o'clock Eastern time kickoff, if you got to get up for work the next day and you don't want to, stay up all the way toward midnight or thereafter, you maybe, give it a feel in the first quarter, second quarter, and see how it goes. So weather alert, low of 41, but clear precipitation. So other than it just being cold, I don't think weather will have any sort of an impact on this game like some of the other bowl games that I had previously mentioned. Now we do have to talk about the injuries and portalers. Four ones who we've talked a lot about. Aubrey Burks, unfortunate the way that this 2024 season is. I think arguably the most disappointing thing individually for 2024 was Aubrey Burks not even giving you half a season. Aiden Garnes continuing to be out. Jaden Bray barely had a 2024 season. Traylon Ray, as we know, broke his leg. What was it, in the Baylor game? So he's still recovering and won't be ready for 2025. And then some portalers. The biggest one and the new commitment this evening was Josiah Trotter, middle linebacker, second leading tackler on the team, committing to Missouri. Took a visit over the weekend to Washington, now today at Missouri, and he commits to the Tigers. Didn't want to be a part of the Mountaineer program moving forward, so smell you later. TJ Crandall already in the transfer portal. Jalen Anderson, Will Dixon, Josiah Jackson, Raleigh Collins. So out of that group, I feel like the only two, I think maybe two would have played potentially in this game. I would think like TJ Crandall and maybe a carry or two to Jalen Anderson, depending upon game flow. So they're once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer is that cliche term that I feel like takes on its own new life every single season with the different individual cases of transfer portalers. So goodbye. What to watch for when Memphis has the ball. So Oh boy, here we go. Then this is the case. I don't know whether it's to make so much out of Memphis this season. Out of that 10-2 record, when I look at their schedule, I mean, I do think this is a team that's worthy of a top 25 ranking. Um, North Alabama was their first game. They beat Troy, who didn't know really what much to make of them. Then they beat a reeling Florida State team, who at that point in time was 0-2 or 0-3, and just like the season was already on the precipice of falling apart. But Memphis beat Florida State 20-12, and I think that game, was on the road at Doak Campbell Stadium. So that's a significant win. Then followed it up with a loss to Navy by 12. Their quality win, I feel like, in conference. They also lost to UTSA. Actually their regular season finale was their best win, beating Tulane by 10. We know Tulane was going to be playing for the Conference USA championship game against Army and ended up losing. So when I look at these numbers about Memphis, I kind of have to look at them a little bit skeptically, considering the American is as watered down as it's ever been. But a 19th highest scoring offense in FBS at 35 points per game, 21st highest total offense in FBS by yardage at 442. They're 24th in the country in passing, tied for 51st in rushing. This team presents as a spread read option attack like most in college football, led by senior quarterback Seth Hennigan, who's given it all for his Tigers. You thought coming in, I think he was the preseason all-conference quarterback. So finished the year very respectable. 3,200 passing yards with 23 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on the season with a 64.5% completion percentage. Also ran the ball for positive 265 yards, but with sacks, he's down to just 129 rushing yards on 72 attempts with a touchdown. More of a pocket passer, no mobile threat. Not even in the same vein, I feel like, of Nico Marchiol, let alone Garrett Green. So he's going to want to do damage through the air, and he's got 5 pass catchers who have all collected 33 or more receptions for the season. For the example, for West Virginia, only 2 players have that many catches or more, Hudson Clement and Cole Taylor. They're led by number 3 senior wide receiver Rock Taylor, who's a first-team all-conference member at 6'3", 215 pounds. He's the team leader in receptions and yards, 61 catches for 834 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season. But man, a varied threat, I feel like, that Memphis possesses aerially. Look at, and they're all seniors. Number 0, redshirt senior Demir Blakumsey, 5'10", 185. Also number 10, redshirt senior wide receiver Kobe Drake, 5'11", 190. Then they have a first-team all-conference tight end in Anthony Landfear. He's a fifth-year senior, 6'5", 250. And then maybe who I'm most impressed by, total numbers, is their senior running back, Mario Anderson Jr., who's also a first-team all-conference player. 219 carries for 1,292 yards with 17 rushing touchdowns. Also has 46 catches for 290 yards and 2 touchdowns. 5 games, he's had 150 yards or more and 5 multi-touchdown games. So just in the way that R.J. Harvey kind of did it all, I feel like, for UCF, man, he can Anderson Jr. is a focal point of this Memphis offense beyond just what Hennigan can give you through the air. I also really like their backup running back, number 13 redshirt junior, Greg DeRozier's Jr. 2 weeks ago against Tulane, he kind of did it all. 6 carries, only 6 carries, but for 41 yards and a touchdown, and also had 8 catches for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. So what I would say, first and foremost, looking at the West Virginia defense versus the Memphis offense, I'm worried about this pass coverage. We know West Virginia's had one of its worst seasons in college football history, or West Virginia football history, I feel like, in covering the pass. I know 2006 was really bad. I know 2012 was really bad. But this season's been really bad too. And again, really miss having Aubrey Burks back there in the secondary. I feel like, nothing, I would say very inconsistent, maybe is the nicest way to put it. Games by Garnet Hollis Jr., Jaheim Joseph, who's been kind of thrust into a starting role, Kokora Tarnu kind of coming on strong in the second half, but consistent is a nice way to put it. Now, Anthony Wilson is giving it his all. He's the team's leading tackler. We know he had that awesome game against Cincinnati, but he's just one guy, and Anthony Wilson a little bit undersized at the position. So he, alongside Kokora Tarnu, and now if you're missing on the other side, you're missing TJ Crandall to kind of rotate in. You're really down to Dontez Fagan at one of your cornerbacks. Also, Aiden Garnes out, so it's going to be him and Jacoby Spells. So really limited number of bodies there in the cornerback room. West Virginia, I'm sure, is going to try and address this as soon as possible out of the transfer portal. And then there's a whole bunch of true freshmen who have really yet to add anything. I know Keon Washington was talked about a few times by head coach Neil Brown, wanting to try and get him involved this season, but haven't seen much of it. Jordan Jackson, we know his brother Josiah is transferred, but he's a second-year player. Where's he at? So can they kind of add something? 10th worst pass defense statistically in FBS. I'm also now worried about the rush defense with Josiah Trotter not there, although I feel a lot more comfortable with Reed Carrico slotting in there at that starting position alongside Trey Lathan than any of the cornerbacks. But still, just such a fierce run defending presence that Josiah Trotter had there in the middle, and I think the trajectory for him was only going to go up as soon as West Virginia hired a new defensive coordinator and can get Trotter into the hard edge program under head coach Rich Rodriguez, but didn't want to be a Mountaineer, so be it. Especially at the 2s and 3s. That's where I'm worried about. Again, all of these seniors who are starting at the 1s, but if anybody potentially goes down, or it is a game of 4 quarters. So if Memphis wants to try and wear West Virginia down, keep the defense on the field, use clock, that's what I'm really worried about, is the physicality and the effort going to be there. And if you get some of the young guys involved into the contest, are they going to take bad angles? Are they just going to have some bad habits? Are they just going to feel overwhelmed going up against some seniors? So that's what I'm worried about. I'm really worried about this Memphis offense against this West Virginia defense, more so than I am about the West Virginia offense against the Memphis defense. So really four guys who I feel like we've talked about some, but I would really like it if they could make a splash play here or there in this contest. Zay Jennings at safety. Looked like an All-American there in the spring game. Or, at least some guy who you thought could potentially rotate in at some point in this season. Why not? Can we see Zay Jennings? Also, Obina Onwuka. Also made a play or two in the spring game thinking okay, maybe there's a few extra bodies I feel like now at the linebacker position to get involved, feel better about that position overall. But can he add something to you? Tyron Bradley is moving on. Ty French moving on. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a bit of a youth movement involved in this game, even if it's just for a series or two, while the game is still competitive. If the game becomes uncompetitive, that's where I don't know. I don't know what head coach Chad Scott's going to want to do, and defensive coordinator Jeff Coons. But anyway, Nate Gabriel on the defensive line, like to see him rotate in there. Same with Elijah Kinsler. Guy who did I think he's played enough games that this could constitute for a full year, or Mekhi Byerson if bowl games don't count toward players' eligibility anymore. That's fine. So get Kinsler in there and get him involved. So what to watch for when West Virginia has the ball against the Memphis defense. Memphis has a 3-3-5 defense, like many around college football, that are multiple. They allow 23 points per game, 356 yards per game. More susceptible through the air, 251 pass yards allowed per game. That's 114th in FBS. whereas Memphis's rush defense is 10th in the country. Yes, you heard that right. 10th in the country at 104 yards per game, and they're top 50 in tackles for loss. Also top 10 in the countries in turnovers gained with 24, 14 fumble recoveries, and 10 interceptions. And they're led by first team all-conference redshirt junior linebacker number 11, Chandler Martin, team leader in tackles, tackles for loss, sacks, QB hurries, and fumble recoveries, 94 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, an interception, 10 QB hurries, 4 fumble recoveries, and a forced fumble. He really can do it all for the Tigers. Also, but they got first team all-conference members at multiple levels, hitting all 3 on the defensive line. Redshirt junior William Whitlow, 23 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and a forced fumble. And then in the back end, redshirt senior cornerback Davion Ross, 45 tackles, a team-high 3 interceptions, 11 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So they have leaders at all 3 levels. I think this is really going to be a true test for interim head coach Chad Scott, who I'd assume will be doing the play-calling duties, at least offensively. Maybe he's delegating the defensive calls, just like Neil Brown did to Chad Scott. I'm assuming so. And we don't know to what extent he was calling, in Chad Scott's case, how much that he was calling plays this season comparative to last season under Neil Brown. If it was more of a, 80-20 split, did Chad Scott have any play calling, like true play calling duties, or he was just a guy that kind of bounced ideas off Neil Brown during a game? Wasn't something that was talked about, I feel like, too much, and at times in the press conferences this season, Chad Scott looked a little bit kind of, I don't want to say perplexed, but just like would want to err on the side of directing those questions to Neil Brown per se. So this is going to be his shot. This is going to be his moment to call plays. And I don't know how much he's going to want to necessarily fight fire with fire. He's a running backs coach by trade, knows the run game. We know West Virginia's bread and butter is the inside zone read. You have Garrett Green, who's going to want to put on a show one last time and run the ball. Getting Jaheim White involved, getting C.J. Donaldson involved. Because I think by the numbers there, Memphis is susceptible through the air. So why wouldn't you want to pass the ball more? But we'll see what kind of game script he comes up with. What kind of a strategy does he want to deploy? Also, how much will we see Garrett Green and how much will we see Nico Marchiol? If we're talking about more importance for how it pertains to 2025, you'd want to see Nico Marchiol for all 4 quarters. What can he do against Memphis's defense? What can he prove if he's going to be the 2025 starter? Is there anything that he can show to new head coach Rich Rodriguez? What is the point other than for pride? Is Garrett Green, the last college football game that Garrett Green's going to play? What is the point of him playing? I get it. Like, it kind of all, you play to win the game, as Herm Edwards would say, but is there more to it than just that for this game? That's my argument. I think one last time for these wide receivers to go out there and show out. Hudson Clement, Justin Robinson, Rodney Gallagher, Preston Fox, Day Farmer, and Cole Taylor. I know Taylor plays the tight end position, but I just gave you the numbers there. Memphis susceptible through the air. Can there be an aerial attack? Can you score points, through the air, unlike West Virginia has yet to do, I feel like, this entire season, or just have not been consistent enough, I feel like, within the passing game, especially on those deep throws. Can't reference it on for my notes for this video, but just the big or deep ball throws, big time throws stat that was really quoted all off season by Pro Football Focus about Garrett Green and how good he was coming into the year. Like that, those numbers were halved, it seemed like, this season. Just the big time throws have not been there. Is that the play calling? Is that the wide receivers creating separation? Is that Garrett Green being more inconsistent this year? Is this more teams have more tape on Garrett Green, so know how to defend him? I think it's a collection of all four of those things, but this is it. This is your last chance, Garrett Green, to go out there and ball out. So may this be the best performance that you had this entire season, and go out there and sling it around. Special teams, I feel like in the kicking game, kind of interesting. Memphis has used 2 kickers this season, both Tristan Vandenberg and Caden Costa. Vandenberg, 7 for 9. Costa, 8 for 13. And also Costa missed 2 extra points. So kicking could be interesting. I would err on the side of Michael Hayes being more consistent of a kicker, 12 of 13 on the season, long of 52, and he's been perfect on his extra points. We're going to have a great kicking battle, everybody. And if there's anything that I love more than 320-pound plus defensive linemen, is an Australian punting contest. So once again, we have another one of those. Ollie Straw for the Mountaineers, 33 punts. 44-yard average on those punts this season, a long of 57, 15 inside the 20, 5 of 50 yards or more. And then for Memphis, senior Joshua Sloan, 45 punts, 44-yard average, like Straw, long of 59, 17 inside the 20, and 5 over 50 plus. So pretty even there. The kickoff returns, also pretty even. You have Preston Fox, who's had 11 returns on the season, really come on strong in the special teams returns game in the second half of the season. 11 returns, a 28-yard average with a long of 43. Meanwhile, for Memphis, they've kind of spread it out amongst a bunch of different players. I think there's just been a lot of fair catches called. Not wanting to do too many returns, but redshirt senior Davion Ross, the corner I've talked about, has taken it 3 times, 25-yard average and a long of 29. And the punt return unit, 2 good ones. From Preston Fox, 13 returns, 8-yard average, long of 29. Drake Kobe doing the returning yardage for the Tigers, 13 returns, 13-yard average, a long of 38. So one of the best in the country there in Kobe. Ollie Straw is going to have to place his punts well in this contest, or the coverage unit's just going to have to do a really good job in this one. So my 3 keys to victory, and I'll get you out on this, maybe a quicker than usual show, just because, again, I feel like, number one, does West Virginia want to play, let alone win? And when I ask that question about let alone win, because this is going to have to be 4 quarters of physicality and a refusal to allow the big play defensively, which West Virginia just unfortunately has not done. I feel like you got to go all the way back to the Oklahoma State game. I mean, I think they did a pretty good job against UCF, but again, you look at this regular season, West Virginia never beat a team with a winning record and lost to all the teams that it played that had winning records. So, and I went back this past weekend, again, because I'm a no life and I'm dealing with a screaming baby all the time. Went back and rewatched the 2004 West Virginia versus Maryland game. Kind of wanted a taste of, the old school Rich Rodriguez Mountaineer teams. I mean, I know I got to go back, into my brain to that era that I lived through it. I was at that game as a young kid, 11 years old, against Maryland in 2004. But I was just amazed at how physical that West Virginia was in that contest defensively. I mean, Adam Lenort, if you remember him at linebacker, went over the pile on like a 3rd or 4th down on like a pretty obvious HB draw, that Lenort just went over the pile, stuffed the running back, and I'm just like, we haven't seen that from a West Virginia defense in eons. West Virginia forced 5 Maryland turnovers in that contest. Pac-Man Jones had 2 interceptions. Just the play with reckless abandonment. This is one of the, I feel like, main reasons that Neil Brown was fired, is that West Virginia has lost its fury. It's lost its hard edge. It's lost its fire, especially defensively. Now, we're not playing the same kind of game that in college football that was being played 20 years ago, where there was a lot more. I was very surprised even how much under center West Virginia was in that contest. Maryland doing it almost exclusively. I know that we're playing really basketball on grass, players playing in so much more space, especially with the read option. You're putting the linebackers on skates, but just like, can this defense show it? I really look at this defensive line. Sean Martin, Fatorma Mulba, TJ Jackson, who really, in the first half of the season, were just, one of the leaders in the country in tackles for loss and quarterback pressures. And then as the season got into the second half, it just seemed like it kind of faded. So if Hennigan is going to hold the ball, dropping back, like, get after him, punish him, make him run around. He's not like Eli Holstein or even Sawyer Robertson from Baylor, where you have some sort of escapability factor. He will be able to, you can chase him down, is what I'm trying to say. And then just in the secondary, I don't know. I think maybe just get back to your roots of being a really good tackling team. I think you can take your nickels and dimes in the, allowing the catches, but just no yards after the catch. Bring the wide receivers down to the ground if you got to give up a reception. I'd like for this defense to not give up receptions the way they do, but we just know that's not going to happen. So limit, bend, but don't break. I think that parlays into my next point is, what did we talk about when West Virginia was being successful? When it beat Arizona, when it beat Cincinnati, when it beat UCF. West Virginia scores on its first offensive series. Especially if you're able to take the ball, please do it. Score on your first offensive series, get a first half turnover, score off said turnover, and play with a multi-score lead. West Virginia is so much better when it's playing with a lead, especially a multi-score lead, than it is when it's trailing. Like, just all hell can break loose. And again, you got to keep this defense hanging around as long as you possibly can. Because, being down Trotter, I know that Crandall was very inconsistent, but at least he added some depth there in the secondary. Just your depth is pretty much depleted at this point on the defensive side of the ball. So you're trusting your seniors and you're trusting a whole bunch of freshmen. So last thing, my third career to victory, I'm just going to title it "Call It In, Coach Scott." He may be the one coach of the Neal Brown staff with the potential of being hired by the Rich Rodriguez staff, or by Rich Rodriguez to fill out the new staff. Because I look at so many different offensive line candidates, even though I give a lot of credit to Matt Moore for how he was able to improve this offensive line. I feel like Matt Moore should have been kicked out the door after the 2021 season, but really turned a corner in 2022, especially into 2023, and stayed stable, I feel like, in 2024. But you got either Rick Trickett, who's a legend. You could potentially go out there and hire two former Mountaineers who I talked about, in maybe a Ryan Stanchek out of UTEP, or you could get a Garen Justice at SMU. To come back and try and get him a sweetheart position on this staff. So if offensive line, the only other position I feel like could be retained, otherwise it's a courtesy, I feel like, to Blaine Stewart to keeping him around. Rich honoring his dad that way to keep him around as a tight ends coach. Then I think Chad Scott's the one guy who really, it seems like, the team can rally around, who it's got that juice, got that fire. And I know that it hasn't been as good a seasons for Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson collectively as you've wanted, but the work that he did with Letty Brown through 2019 up through 2021, then transitioning to Donaldson, then the evolution of Jaheim White. I think that Chad Scott's that one coach that could kind of be a bridge from the old staff to the new staff, while being young enough, while being, I feel like, a coach that is coachable to, and like, already I feel like coaches with, I don't know. I don't want to say aggression. I don't know. Like, don't know Coach Scott. Just see what I see on Saturdays, and then I see, on social media videos and stuff like that. But it just seems like he could be one I feel like I could see on next year's staff, and especially if that means keeping around a guy like Jaheim White, who really, really, and C.J. Donaldson. So this is his chance. I feel like this is his moment to go out there, show that he can call some plays, that he can scheme, that he can do more than just be a running backs coach. Is there some potential there in Coach Scott that, like, hey, this is potentially a guy that, if Rich Rodriguez kind of laid a foundation for Tony Gibson years later to become a coach, that Rich could bring Chad Scott onto the staff, continue to, develop him as part of his coaching program to potentially blossom somewhere else. So that's what I want to see. I want to see, does he become stubborn? Does he, not rest on his laurels, but like what he's familiar with trying to run the ball. I think third down calls are going to be very vitally important. Red zone opportunities. What does he call when? And how successful can West Virginia be against it? Because, looking at the numbers, Memphis looks very daunting. Looks like a team, and it has a lot of seniors on it, explosive, probably really motivated and wants to go out there and win this game. So whereas West Virginia, I feel like, is 1 foot still in 2024, 1 foot already in 2025. So if you have split concentration out there, that's when, damage can happen. It can get ugly, and if Memphis is hot, if they can kind of do the same kind of things that Texas Tech did against West Virginia, look out. So watching Coach Scott and how he coaches this game, if I had to do a prediction for this game, 8-4 on the season. Missed the Pitt game, missed the Oklahoma State game, missed the Iowa State game, missed the Baylor game. Otherwise, I was right on my predictions for the season, so not bad. I would say 38-27 Memphis. I just don't believe in this West Virginia defense. I thought, given the offensive firepower that Texas Tech had, I thought Texas Tech could score that much. I didn't think they would do that in regulation. I thought West Virginia, if they could put up, have a really good offensive performance and go shot for shot with Texas Tech for fourth quarters, it could go into overtime. But I had no idea that they were going to give up that many points to the Red Raiders, just with the Mountaineers kind of, I feel like, laying over. So I think West Virginia will give effort, especially in the first half, sometimes with, like we saw in the Duke's Mayo Bowl last year, unfamiliar opponent from a different conference, that they are going to hold their own. But again, you're going to wear on the ones a lot, and then you're putting in a lot of true freshmen who haven't had a lot of playing time this season, and that's where I think Memphis is going to finally break open the dam. And I think 38 points is about right. I think that's about where kind of West Virginia's unfortunately been consistent this season, is right in the upper 30s, which is not good enough, truly not good enough. And it's because of unfortunately, just I feel like lack of development, lack of talent. It's everything. Lack of Jordan Leslie coaching, and then the scheme, which I would love to see West Virginia put a fourth man down on the defensive line, but that's a story for the offseason that we can talk about. 27 points. Again, I feel like I've just been optimistic at times to a fault with this West Virginia offense, and where I think they, I think back to that Duke's Mayo Bowl game, West Virginia really struggled to run the ball last year. And I don't think it had anything to do, I think it had to do with a better defensive line than I was expecting in North Carolina. So with Wyatt Milam, I feel better about this contest. I feels like all, 5 starters who have started all season are going to start in this game and want to play. They're going to give it their all. I think C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White are both going to run hard, but I think what is going to make a difference for me is tempo. And I guess that can go back to what I was saying about Chad Scott, is he going to want to window dress like Neil Brown wanted to window dress? Did he want to, either huddle up or use 35 seconds of play clock? Like, it's just so slow, so methodical. Another reason why I thought Neil Brown was fired is just like, you go way too slow. You don't allow enough time with this accelerated game clock that's come to college football for enough time to score points and for these players to put up stats. So that'll be a huge key for me. I feel like in the last couple of seasons, like you can think back to the Houston game a year ago, Oklahoma State a year ago, UCF this season, like when West Virginia has wanted to go faster, it plays better. So I don't know why Neil Brown was so risk averse to that, but can West Virginia go out there and do that this year? So in this game, if they can do that and they can do that successfully and score, I think there is an opportunity to score more than 27 points. But you got to prove it. Got to prove it out there. I hope West Virginia wins, but unfortunately, I'm just with the Tigers in this contest for this one. So love to know your thoughts and feelings. Do you feel kind of similarly to like me, that you're just kind of confused on and want to really see, and you will know probably by the first possession or two, especially defensively, West Virginia's heads at in this game? How much emphasis have they put in this contest? Or are they just going to let it all out on the field and some schoolyard BS, like they say in The Longest Yard? Or are they just going to get trampled on, want to get on the plane without any sort of bumps and bruises and injuries, and come back home to Morgantown and on to 2025? So not ideal playing in this Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl, the really kind of, I'd say, one of the first bowls of bowl season. West Virginia is used to playing, I feel like, at least deeper into December or some January bowl games. But it is what it is. Go Mountaineers. If you like this video, please like it so more Mountaineer fans will see it across YouTube. Love to have you as a subscriber to my channel as we get into the thick of things for 2025, and then also turn our attention more to basketball. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. I'll be back probably Wednesday? Probably Wednesday. Wednesday night, maybe video drop on Thursday, I feel like, after the game is over, and we'll recap it. So recap it with a final wrap to 2024. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hail West Virginia, spot the ball.